pull up a chair. There's something I want to show you from up here in the attic. I've been going through boxes, actual cardboard boxes, the kind with handwritten labels in pencil, and what keeps stopping me cold isn't the photographs or the letters. It's the recipe cards. Small, grease-stained, written in that careful cursive that women of that generation used for everything important. And what's on those cards? Meals, full, generous, beautiful meals. The kind of food that made a family feel taken care of. Here's what gets me. These women were feeding 4, 5, 6 people on budgets that, adjusted for inflation, would make most of us today genuinely pale. The average American family in 1950 spent roughly 22% of their income on food, and yet the quality of what landed on those tables, roasts, pies with lattice crusts, creamed vegetables, casseroles that were actual events, not sad, stretched food. Real food. So what happened? Where did this knowledge go? Let's start with something almost nobody talks about anymore, the Sunday roast as a weekly economy system. A 1950s housewife didn't buy a chicken to cook a chicken. She bought a chicken to cook all week. Sunday was the roast, proper, with drippings and gravy, maybe a bread stuffing if she was feeling generous. Monday was leftovers, sliced cold or reheated with the pan juices. Tuesday, she made a hash with the remaining meat, onions, and potatoes. Wednesday, soup, actual broth, made from the carcass she'd been simmering since Monday afternoon. By Thursday, there was barely a bone left. That's not poverty cooking. That's mastery. One bird, purchased once, fed a family for the better part of a week. The economics are almost embarrassing compared to how most of us cook today, buying separately for every single meal, throwing away scraps, running to the store 3 times a week. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tracked food expenditure patterns in 1951. Working class families spent an average of $22 to $28 per week on groceries, which lands around $240 to $280 in today's money. That sounds like it might be comparable until you account for the fact that those families were larger, that processed convenience food didn't exist yet to inflate the bill, and that they were eating from scratch. Every day, now, the cream soups. Let's talk about the cream soups. Cream of mushroom, cream of celery, cream of tomato. These weren't coming out of cans in the 1950s home kitchen. Not for dinner. The can was an emergency shortcut or a baking ingredient. The real version was built from a basic white sauce, a roux, just butter and flour, nothing complicated, with whatever cream or whole milk was on hand and whatever vegetable needed to be used before it turned. This became the base of dozens of recipes. Pour it over biscuits, you have creamed chicken. Thin it out with stock, you have soup. Thicken it, add cheese, pour it over cauliflower. There's your gratin. One foundational skill, infinite variations. And the taste, rich, satisfying, the kind of thing that makes a Tuesday feel cared for. There's a concept that got completely lost somewhere between the 1960s and the 1990s, the planned leftover. Not accidental leftover. Not, oops, we made too much pasta. A deliberate, intentional second life built into the original meal from the start. Pot roast on Sunday became beef hash on Wednesday. Mashed potatoes became potato cakes, fried crispy in the cast iron with butter. The next morning at breakfast, stale bread became bread pudding, which was dessert but also used sugar more sparingly than any cake recipe. Women in the 1950s didn't think of this as being thrifty. It was simply how you cooked. The Depression had been close enough, many of them were teenagers during it, that the habit of never wasting anything had become second nature, not a sacrifice. The median household income in 1950 was about $3,300 annually. A pound of ground beef cost around 57 cents. A dozen eggs, about 60 cents. A loaf of bread, 14 cents. The numbers seem small until you run the ratio. Food wasn't cheap. It just required skill to make it stretch, and these women had that skill in abundance. Then there's the garden. Even in cities, even in small yards, the kitchen garden was common in ways we've completely forgotten. Victory gardens from World War II had already taught an entire generation to grow their own food. By 1950, many families were still keeping them. Tomatoes, green beans, cucumbers, lettuces, herbs. A modest backyard plot could reduce a family's vegetable bill by 30 to 40% through summer and fall. And the canning. The women who canned their own vegetables in August were eating those same vegetables in January from jars they'd put up themselves. It sounds like enormous work. It was, but it was also a form of financial resilience that simply doesn't exist in most households today. Um, the modern equivalent would be buying in bulk and freezing, which works, but loses something in the translation. Here's the thing that strikes me most when I hold these recipe cards. There's no desperation in the language, no make do, no apology. These are confident recipes. This is what we're having energy. Pineapple upside down cake for a Tuesday. Deviled eggs at a neighborhood gathering. Jello molds that were genuinely festive and made from scratch with fresh fruit folded in, not just the packet and water. The 1950s housewife understood something about the psychology of the table that we've sort of drifted away from. How a meal looks and feels matters. Presentation wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about dignity, about saying to the people sitting down with you, you are worth the effort. That's not a Depression era attitude. That's something that survived the Depression and came out the other side, polished. A lot of what made this possible wasn't magic. It was three things: a plan for the week, a willingness to cook from scratch, and the knowledge that cheap cuts of meat, the braising cuts, the stewing cuts, the ones that required low heat and patience, were actually the most flavorful ones. Beef, chuck, pork shoulder, chicken thighs. These weren't budget compromises. They were right, proper choices that happened to cost less. Most of those techniques are still sitting right there, waiting. The braising, the white sauce, the Sunday roast system, the planned leftover, none of it requires anything special. Just time and the willingness to slow down a little in the kitchen. These women fed their families like royalty, not because they had money to spend. Um, they did it because they had something a lot of people today have let go of: the conviction that a home cooked meal made with care and thought is worth the effort every single time. If you've got a recipe card from your grandmother tucked somewhere, a drawer, a box, a folder, go find it. Read it. Cook from it this week. I think you'll be surprised. And if you find something worth sharing, I want to see it.